All right, welcome, Dana. Welcome to my new
guest
haircut.
today is Dr. David Spade, who's from. No, we have a guest we've had before.
Yeah,
Dr. Greer, a ufologist, a trauma doctor who found out some secret stuff about the government and has devoted the last 25, 30 years to exposing it. So take it from there, David.
Well, listen, we like Dr. Greer. We had him on before. We got a lot of comments on YouTube. I think people think he's very interesting. It's a riveting conversation. Like, I don't even know if I was ready for it because I'm telling you, we haven't been shut up like that in a while. And because we want to let him talk, and he's got a lot to say. And it started by saying, hey, all these things over New Jersey. And then there's also drones and orbs seen everywhere and all over the country and world. And everyone's panicking. And do you know anything that we don't? Which, of course, he does.
That was our main thing. We wanted to get information on these unidentified flying objects, i.e. drones, where they're from, how they move, how they disappear, what they're related to, why, what are they up to? Why are they here? And he does, he goes on some tangents, but he does basically answer those questions.
They're mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling stuff.
I have to say, we didn't do many jokes. I wanted to say for $2 trillion, you can get some pretty decent orbs, which you'll get that joke once you're watching. But we let him talk, and he talks about where he thinks they're from, why they're there. We talk about extraterrestrials, obviously the most interesting part. And should we be scared? Should we not be scared? What's the future? And God, did he have some answers?
Just basically, there's, without giving it away, there's some information that may be coming down from a whistleblower very soon. And there is potentially rogue organizations that are doing these things. So anyway, it's a lot to unpack. David Spade went 17 minutes without talking, just so you know.
That's never happened. Even in my sleep, it hasn't.
I know. And I went 1802. I timed both. It's not a competition, but he goes on a lot of tangents, and you really want to listen to, it's a very comprehensive talk. So take it for what it is. There's a lot of people out there saying a lot of things, but here's someone who's very interesting.
We'll get back to our jokey jokes next week, but I think we just got to run this because every time we had something to ask him, he would just start covering a new interesting thing. And I'm like, oh my God. We were just dumbfounded. So see if you are. You might not buy into this whole thing. You might, but he has so much backing and so much on his website that you go, something's going on here. Something's happening.
No one knows what's really going on, but he's putting out some information that's kind of interesting, and I found it mesmerizing. So
all right. So here, listen up. Tell us what you think at the comments. Okay, so you got to follow. Tag BetMGM across all your socials. You know this.
Are you serious?
BetMGM.
Yeah, wow. Wow.
Wow.
That's Christopher Walken reacting to that news. Also, the tagline, the sports book born in Vegas. Wow. Vegas born sports book.
They are the sports book born in Vegas.
Sports book born in Vegas.
Yes, Walken, you got it.
I'm talking Walken.
The second chance on a first touchdown score. Let me explain.
All season. Can it finish one time? All season long. BetMGM's offering you a second chance on your first touchdown bet. When a customer places a wager on the first touchdown score bet, and he does not score first, can it finish one time, but scores second, we will return 100% of their stake back in cash. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to gamble responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. This U.S. promotional offer not available in Ontario.
Gambling problem, Dana? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. For New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. For Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. For Massachusetts, 1-800-327-5050. For Iowa, Bets off. For Puerto Rico, 1-800-981-0023. Subject to eligibility requirements in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. There's our buddy.
Thanks for coming on, Dr. Greer.
Oh, sure.
I know this is the big
Stevie
time for you.
This is go time.
It's gotten very bad.
Super Bowl.
We're intensely curious, but I don't even know where to start. Do you want to make an opening statement?
Yeah.
We're recording this.
Yeah, you can start because we know what we're going to ask you.
I'm talking to Ted Cruz, right? Ted, he's on now. Okay, I'll ask him that.
Oh, good. Fire away, Ted.
No. Anyway, so is your head spinning, or you're looking at this from a completely different point of view than almost all of us in America? So what are your just basic thoughts about this phenomenon of things in the sky?
There you go.
Well, I mean, as you know, I've predicted this sort of thing would happen for 30 years. There's a covert rogue military component that is behind all these drone sightings. Some of them are drones, some of them are a little more advanced.
Drone sightings.
And most of them are part of a rogue military operation to basically create a psychological warfare effect in the media and in the public in advance of something that nobody knows is going to happen, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. So there's a group of
the psychological part is working, by the way. We're all scared.
We're all terrified.
Yeah, you should be. So this is very serious. So there's a group of guys who I've known for about 18, 19 months who are senior intel and aerospace operatives out of some desert locations. I'm not going to mention where they are. I've been to them, where most of the R&D testing and operations dealing with so-called UFOs, UAPs occur. Now, this guy, the main guy, has 6 other black sites, as they're called, operational sites that are very secretive, and are these particular ones are ones that are rogue and been running illegally for a long time. He is coming forward in the next 30 days or so, maybe less, with the evidence and unmasking himself and some of his operators, special forces guys, about what's going on at these sites, and with evidence. In other words, he's been operational when they have targeted and downed extraterrestrial vehicles. He's been present when they've tested man-made UFOs, which are mostly what people see, that are essentially anti-gravity craft. And he's been present when there are a number of illegal operations that have occurred, including the incidental hitting and downing of civilian private planes that go up over this test area after a temporary flight restriction has gone up. So there are innocent people who have been murdered, and there's no evidence that they were hit. So these are serious guys. The main guy I've been dealing with, I know some of the others, has been in those operations for 29 years, since the 1995 period, but he was very young. At that time, he didn't know he was involved in an illegal and unsanctioned operation. He does now, and they're fed up with it, and they want to come forward. Now, in advance of that, because what he's going to bring forward would be, I understand, if he can get this done in the next 3 weeks or so, would be the videos, the evidence, the proof, not only of the NHI, as they call them, non-human intelligence craft and bodies and beings, but of the man-made ones, and also of some operations that involve the transport of humans in experimental operations from distressed areas around the world. Now, as you know, we have a whistleblower who was a Marine who came across this in 2009 in Indonesia after there was an earthquake and tsunami. And he came across an operation of what looked like an octagonal disc that was about 300 feet across, size football field, that was levitating above a clearing in the jungle. And his platoon came across this. They were almost killed by these operators who were American, but were not did not look like they were any part of any armed forces insignia or uniform.
Yeah.
And they had crated up and were transporting humans who were barely alive. And they said, look, you can come with us. And then those were moved over into, we found later, experimental programs at some of these STIFs, these subterranean facilities, underground bases. So all of this is a very complex story. They have the goods, they have the proof. This will be the biggest disclosure related to these sort of issues in history. Well, I say it's going to be the biggest disclosure in human history, period. So in advance of that, these fascists and criminals that have, at the core of these covert operations, have been launching these sort of decoy drone events, and also orbs. People are seeing these orb-like things.
Yeah.
Those aren't extraterrestrial either. 100% of it's man-made. And we can unpack that. Then this is a huge problem, because this is going to happen during this transition before the next president comes in. I've been, doing kind of shuttle briefings from London to the incoming presidential team and the existing leaders at the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee. So I've just been going flat out, for the last few months, because we've known about this for some time. Now, this last flurry of all this activity, there are various reasons I think are being given inside out of Peterson Air Force Base and a couple other operational facilities that these drones are part of a black budget project because they're sniffing out potentially a dangerous weapon that's gone loose or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard that from several very good, highly placed folks in the intelligence community. That could also be a misdirect to create panic and concern. But I do know that this is very serious. It's not just people misidentifying small aircraft. And these actually are part of a covert rogue military and corporate organization that I've been blowing the whistle on for 30 years. In fact, the way I knew this operation was illegal was when I briefed President Clinton's first CIA director on the matter, and on December 13th, 1993. So it's 31 years ago this past week. And he and the president had no access or knowledge of these programs. And remember, my uncle and other people I knew worked Northrop Grumman and these Lockheed Skunk Works programs. And I had all the evidence already in 1993. And so at that point, we did conclude that the operations dealing with this subject, even though it's the butt of a lot of jokes and whatnot, little green man, haha, that is actually being run very secretively, but also illegally, without the oversight of the Congress or the president. Now, there are people embedded in the White House, National Security Council, Congress, who are operatives, who actually are there to gaslight and deceive the senior members of the Senate and the House. But for the most part, it has gone unsupervised since about 1957 to 1959, when this organization decided to tell Eisenhower and his folks to go jump in the lake. And they took all these projects deep black, meaning illegal. And there is a legal budget of the United States. It's the black budget that only the president and a handful of senators and congressmen see. But this is beyond that. That's beyond their oversight and supervision. So you can imagine how dangerous that is. And we're not talking a trivial amount of money. I'd say since the late 50s, 60s, somewhere on the order of $8 to $10 trillion have gone into those kind of projects from various agencies and departments. So, we're talking, what's that, a third of our national debt. But the other problem, and this is the biggest one, I just might as well drop this bomb at the beginning.
Absolutely.
No, I haven't started yet.
No pun
bro.
intended.
Yeah, bro, I ain't started yet. So what has happened is that if you can visualize 75 years of some of the most brilliant scientists and engineers on planet Earth, who sometimes identify in high school, college, postgrad, are pulled into these covert programs to study the extraterrestrial material, meaning the craft, the technologies, and what have you. By late 1950s, there were operational man-made UFOs that were anti-grav type devices. And we have schematics of them. We have images of them. And people often will see those and think it's alien. I go, oh, no, it didn't. My uncle's company, Northrop Grumman, built that one. It's a triangle, right? Or Raytheon or Lockheed Skunk Works. So now we get this. Now go forward 75 years and that kind of money and brain power studying this kind of material. And you have some technologies that are in the hands of these rogue and criminal elements, there's no other way to word it, that are way beyond the power of, say, a thermonuclear weapon or something like that, because you're dealing with being able to move across space-time at multiples of the speed of light, all kinds of advanced tech. And those can be used in what are called deceptive indications and warnings or false flag operations. So some of what you see with this sort of phenomenon, occasionally it will be actually what they call NHI or non-human intelligence. I'd say 80, 90% of the time it's ours, but very advanced. Now, some of it's clunky, like our old-fashioned drones with rotors, and some of them are loud that have been reported because they have regular conventional engines. There's some of the objects that have been put up over some of these sites in their military installations are not so prosaic, and they're advanced. And this is why some members of Congress and even people in the Pentagon think, oh, well, maybe it's an adversary or maybe it's from outer space. It isn't. It's all from this rogue group because they have technologies that at this point in 2024 would almost be indistinguishable from an actual extraterrestrial vehicle. Not quite, but very advanced. And I have a number of whistleblowers who come forward describing those, particularly the ones I think out of Raytheon and a few other corporate operations. So remember, Ben Rich told a member of my team before he died, and Ben Rich was the head of the famous Lockheed Skunk Works. He said, anything you can imagine, we've already done at the Lockheed Skunk Works. He said, not at Area 51. The real action is the Lockheed Skunk Works. It's in underground facilities. And he says, anything you've seen portrayed on Star Trek, we can do it, and we've done it. So now this.
Well, wait a minute. You can beam people, because that seems like the coolest thing. Beam me down to a planet.
They do. Yeah, they do have technologies for what's called teleportation. Of course, in physics, if you look it up, it's happened with particles through the what's called entanglement, quantum entanglement, where every point in space and time is interconnected. But with the kind of technology they've been able to study that are NHI or extraterrestrial, those are so advanced, you're obviously not going to be going from one star system to another at anything that's the speed of light. You're going to have to go through an entangled aspect of the universe through gravity. It kind of like that. It's more the creation of through gravitational waves, being able to basically bend space and time. So if you look at point A to B through 1,000 light years of space, and look at it as a straight line, like on a piece of paper, fold the piece of paper. They're like this.
That.
All right.
Make them touch.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the sort of technology. Unfortunately, some of the worst people on the planet have it. It is not known by, I don't know of a president since I've been working on this who's been read in or briefed on it properly. So that's been 34 years.
Are the worst people other leaders or just bad people we have in America, or
This
just
is the covert
terrorists?
rogue military operation, right?
It's covert, rogue, military, corporate. I'd say the center of power on this is corporate. But there are people who are embedded in the Pentagon and even in the House and Senate. And I know who a couple of them are. I'm not going to go into it too much right here, but they're part of that organization. And they're mainly there to just, none of this is true. And to just sort of gaslight their colleagues. Because, like the Senate is a club of 100 guys and women. And it's not hard to deceive them. And, if it's coming from one of your senior colleagues, you're going to think it's real. Like if a doctor tells another doctor or a lawyer, another lawyer, there's a built-in affinity group, sort of credibility. So those have been embedded. And there are people embedded within the Pentagon, although to get people up to speed on how kind of as screwed up you think Washington is, it's more screwed up. So, I mean,
Now,
as bad as you think it is.
Could I just go back to the beginning for a second, and we can walk our way through? Because the first thing you said, well, just kind of blew my mind. A rogue organization, military in nature, probably with corporate entities, is putting these things in the air to create distrust, to create a little bit of panic for some reason we don't know. And you personally talked to you'd call him a whistleblower, right? Who within 30 days, if this is a movie, because it feels like a science fiction movie, obviously it's real.
Yep, yeah, it does.
But that would seem like that gentleman's life he should be very careful. And also, within 30 days, this will be in a congressional hearing, or just go to the media?
God, no. Let me tell you how this is going to happen.
Videos or people?
Yes. Yeah. He's releasing. Now, remember, he's been operational about 15 months ago. He took me in his helicopter over these classified sites and exactly over the opening of one of the underground bases. I have that footage. We have it. I provided it to the Senate Intelligence Committee pretty quickly. About 3 weeks later, I was almost killed in a terrible accident and have since recovered. But no, this is deadly serious stuff. And and of course, he and his whole family are at tremendous risk. They know the risk, but these are big boys. I mean, they're very way up there with special operations. They've all been either Green Beret, Delta Force, those guys. And so, these are not just your corporate shills, right? Dancing around in penny loafers and three-piece suits. So, so they know what they're doing. I've been asked to sort of put out to the public and to the incoming administration the details of this. So there's a heads up, as well as the existing administration and Congress. Yeah, because right now everyone's going to be caught unawares. And this spate of drone and other strange sightings, it really is to induce fear, because one of the plans, if you remember, I don't know if you guys remember Werner von Braun. He invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler. Mm-hmm. Okay. So his spokeswoman for the last 5 years of his life, he was dying of liver cancer, is on our team, Carol Rosen. And she was the first woman executive in the aerospace industry. And back in 1974, Werner von Braun said to her, what we're going to do, we're going to hoax an alien threat to consolidate sort of a totalitarian power around the world, because it'll be so frightening to people. They will give up their freedoms, and they will, et cetera, and so on. Sort of like the overreaction, but on a much larger scale, what happened with COVID and 9/11 and the Gulf of Tonkin and the Vietnam War. So that kind of operation has been going on for a very long time. This is the granddaddy of them. This is the one that people have feared.
Is this Blue Beam, or is that something else?
I do not have that code name. People talk about Project Blue Beam. I think that's just a name attached to this. The people I work with who actually read into and been involved in that plan, and I have debriefed people involved with that plan very specifically, beginning in the mid-90s. None of them have used that term. So I'm very careful. I'm a scientist. I'm a trauma doctor. I try to avoid, the rubbish that's on the internet, because most of it is rubbish. But at the same time, if there's a name attached to it like that, that's a code word, what they're called code word projects. I don't know it, but I know what the project is, and I know people who have been operational to fulfill it. Back in 1997, we had a man who came to Washington to provide some information at meetings I was having, and he had been on an interagency committee, and they could basically hit a button and start hoaxing the kind of nonsense you're seeing now to make people think there's some alien attack happening. So I think this is where we're very vulnerable. Neither the media nor the public nor our leaders are properly briefed and have enough of the information. What this man and his team defecting with will put that to rest if they're successful. And I think they will be, frankly. I heard from him yesterday. after I received a death threat and was told I was going to be arrested as a Russian spy. Can you believe it? Me and Tulsi Gabbard are big Russian spies. Anyway, the whole thing is just so bizarre. But this is the kind of games that are played. It's to be expected. It's stressful, obviously, but this man's very courageous. I mean, they're real patriots. Absolutely. Actually, these are real patriots who. One of them who was driving me in an armored vehicle last year in the LA area, going out to the desert, said, thank you for what you're doing for those of us stuck on the other side. That's what he said. And he was referring to the fact these are good guys who got moved without their knowledge. It just crept up on them where they realized once they got high enough in the program that they were in an illegal and unconstitutional
Can I ask you a specific, just for the public, in terms of here we are, December 19th, during Christmas or the next 2 or 3 weeks, if you don't know, you wouldn't know, but will there be more of these drones or objects over more cities, less, or the same?
They seem to be around a lot of cities all over the world right now, not just New Jersey.
Or is it going to be a global thing? Will it probably increase? But if they see this podcast, they'll know that there might be outed in a few weeks. So I don't know if that would reorientate anything, but.
Well, it is. It's a very dynamic situation that's changing all the time. There are a lot of levers and buttons they can push. If you want me to go through them, you won't sleep tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Are we safe? I'm just going to ask you.
I already have a full diaper.
Good. No. Until there's an executive order from the president and similar orders from Great Britain and other countries where this organization has operations that gives potential to a group that I've been working with, again, for about 20 months. It's a separate group. They're not part of these secret UFO programs, but they are all special forces guys that have been asked to be part of an operation to take down these illegal sites and neutralize those weapon systems. Now, I've been providing that team with intelligence and briefings for about 20 months. These are mostly Green Berets that have separated from the military and who are preparing to go active. Now, what we're hoping is that doesn't have to happen, at least not in a kinetic or violent way, but that there will be enough people defecting from those operations that they're rendered non-operational. I wouldn't bet the planet on it. So I think it's very important, whoever is the president when this comes out, and I'm told it'll happen sometime between now and early January. So to me, early January means before the 15th.
Biden.
So that could be Biden, and it could be no one will deal with it until sometime after, because they'll have to get their sea legs on. I'm heading out tomorrow to go to some meetings with some people who are very close to the incoming president. By the way, to be on the record, I've dealt with any president, left, right, center, in their administration for 30 years. I'm not partisan at all. But if it's the office of the president, right, that we have to look at, and the Constitution and the government and our freedom, right? So I just want people to be very clear, whether it was Clinton or now it's Trump, or at a time when Obama had John Podesta, who put his cabinet together, was working on trying to find out what this was. Across the board, I've just worked with them. And same thing overseas. I mean, my job, and also, just to be clear, I'm just a private doctor who did this because I found out about it and started this whole disclosure project operation back in the 90s. But I have no official position with any government at all. And I've never wanted one, frankly. It would put shackles on us, because right now we have 7. If you go to we just put about 34 years of research online. It's called the DPI Archive, Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive.com. Right. So DPIarchive.com, and you'll see at DPIarchive.com an unbelievable amount of content. We're talking 115 or so named whistleblower witnesses, name, rank, serial number, testimony, the list of another 600 plus whose names are redacted because they don't want to be out in the public yet, that I have debriefed, thousands of pages of government documents, about 122 documented cases of our downing crashed extraterrestrial vehicles, and in some cases, man-made ones that look ET. And many of those have named witnesses attached to them, and they're illustrated by a forensic artist. So you see what they look like. You see what the little the ETs look like of different sizes. I mean, some are tiny and some are bigger than we are, but there's a whole different variety of species. So that's
drstevengreer.com.
I put that online in advance of this on purpose, to be honest with you. I knew this was coming, and a couple years ago, I created a crash effort to digitize my archiving. And the parts of it I can put out. Much of it's redacted, obviously, people's names and methods and things that are sensitive. But I'd say 90% of it's out there for anyone who wants to look through it. It's free. Get on board.
So, and going full circle to the public just for a second again. So, Biden said today, and another person used this word. There's nothing nefarious. Nothing nefarious about this. So, should people be frightened? I mean, it seems like some of these are heavy objects.
Well, they have to say
right
that,
over someone's house. So, why wouldn't you be a little anxious to have a big drone on top of your house? They can crash.
Well, they have, and that gets hushed up. But I'll tell you, part of the problem is I'm sort of the leading indicator putting this information out, and some people that I had that I had been on their shows 3, 4, 5 years ago and say, God, everything you said then is happening, and it's because I've had knowledge of this for a long time. Yeah. Now, if you're the president or you're in charge of the National Security Advisor, National Security Council, you don't want to induce panic, and you don't want people to be freaking out. And in fact, that plays to the purpose of this cabal of criminals and sociopaths who are doing it. And the other problem is that if there's an unverified report, say, of a loose nuclear weapon, which is one of the reports I've received, you do not want people to think that that's something that no one has a handle on, or worse, if there are objects that are so advanced that they seem indistinguishable from an extraterrestrial or alien object, but they're not, then what do you say about that? I will tell you that I have never met with someone at the most senior ranks of the government, Senate Intelligence Chair, co-chairs, or people on other committees in the House or White House, or foreign leaders or ministers of defense who know much, if anything, about this subject. That is how clandestine it is. And most people only find out later how dangerous that is. I know back in 1997, I briefed and you can look this up, it leaked out on the internet, what's called J2, the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And, there's a guy who puts the intelligence briefings together for the whole Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was an Admiral Tom Wilson. And he agreed to having a stand-up briefing that I did at the Pentagon in his offices in April of 97. And before then, I sent him some documents, including a National Reconnaissance Office, which is the top secret spy satellite office, secret memo from Area 51 about this issue. And it had project code names and code numbers on it. That document is in the archive. You can see online. It has not been declassified. It doesn't matter because we've declared these projects rogue and illegal and unconstitutional. So they don't have any right of a top secret clearance, frankly. So that's the basis of our whole disclosure project. But the Admiral started digging into this, and before we had the meeting, and he was personally threatened, and he was threatened with having a star taken off his lapel and demoted and forced into retirement. So even his inquiry about it. Now, this is the man in charge of putting together the intelligence briefings for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So this problem is enormous. I recently was in London from a very high senior official there who knows of a prime minister who, I don't want to say who it is, who when he started looking into this, he and his entire family threatened with being assassinated. So this is serious stuff, my friends.
Look, David, it's the holidays. Okay. So don't lose track of your finances and overdo the spending this time of year. Buying
Good.
gifts and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Parties.
Mhm.
It's just a lot of money. Really, be careful. David, take the headache out of building credit fast with Kickoff. And by the way, and guess what? It's the #1 credit building app in the App Store. Their plan starts at, you heard me, $5 a month. There's no credit check, no hidden fees, and no interest. Capiche?
Kickoff is a credit line that's just for credit building, not for everyday spending.
Love
Let's
it.
say your credit is under 600, it could jump like 28 points your first month. That is a lot. That is
a
legit.
lot.
It's a smart credit hack with no catch, no credit check, no hidden fees, and no interest. I like that. It's simple.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to join in. I was feeling the mirth because it's Christmas time. It's simple. You make on-time payments. Credit bureaus see good behavior, and your credit grows.
That's what matters. Yeah.
Fast.
Credit. That's right. You start building credit immediately for only $1 your first month. $1.
Whoa. You can build credit in your sleep with
like
a
that.
thing called autoplay. Makes sense. You never have to worry about missing a payment, David.
Autopay. Sign up in minutes with your phone. No credit check. You cancel anytime.
By the way, David, Kickoff is the #1 credit building app out there.
I was going to say that. I was going to tell you that.
Yes, it has over 100,000 positive reviews on the App Store. 98% are, I'd love this, 5 stars. Good night.
Listen, worry less about your credit. Enjoy the holidays more with Kickoff. For a limited time, get your first month free. Go to getkickoff.com/superfly.
That's
today.
right.
That's the important part.
Hurry for a month free of Kickoff without the C. Get KIKOFF.com/superfly.
Must sign up via getkickoff.com/superfly to activate offer. Offer applies to new Kickoff customers first month only. Subject to approval. Average impact of 28-point increase in the first month based on Equifax Vantage Score 3.0. Changes for Kickoff customers with starting credit below 600 who made their first on-time payment between January 2021 and March 2024.
Payment and credit activity outside Kickoff can have an impact on your credit. Terms and conditions may apply. Offer subject to change. Individual results may vary. So just to reiterate here for people who are just joining us,
Yeah, I have a
Dr.
question.
Greer, trauma doctor, comes upon this information in the late 90s, and then you've really devoted the last 25, 30 years to exposing it, along with different other things, extraterrestrials and UFOs and all kinds of things like that. But this in specific. And then perhaps by January 15th, a whistleblower will come out, and this will be the seminal moment of all this 30 years. If it's the way it comes out, and if the world discovers this secret military rogue operation that's been dealing in all these.
So they're mirroring the alien non-human, so you can't really tell the difference of people who think it's an alien, or this is sort of good versus evil. There's good people involved trying to beat the people that have all this information also, and they're a little ahead of the game.
Well, let's say the constitutional government of the United States is several thousand years technologically behind this rogue element. That's the real problem.
Oh.
They do not have the technologies of this
iPhone versus Lego.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking smoke. I mean, the world we're living in right now, my friends, is smoke signals. And this organization that's very transnational have things that are equivalent of beyond the speed of light stuff. So I think that we have to look at this in a very dry-eyed way. I'm not at all hopeless about it. It's a difficult time. I knew it would come to this at some point, and I was very shaken about 19 months ago when 2 groups of people approached me. One are these deep, covert illegal operations guys wanting to come forward, and the other is this group that were asked to be stood up to take down these illegal programs. And that happened within about 2 months of each other. And they didn't know each other. And I had put them together in a handshake. The director of that team, that would be the strike team to get these illegal sites under control, has joined me out in the desert and met this gentleman and some of the people on his team. So they're communicating. But the defectors are being very careful. He hasn't given me a date. He's just given me a general idea of what the evidence that would be dumped out would be, and it would involve the non-human craft, extraterrestrial craft downing. Now, one of the sites I was over, he just turned very nonchalantly to me and the director of this Green Beret and said, "Look, we knocked down 1 or 2 extraterrestrial vehicles per year over this one site. Then we flew 100 and some miles out in the desert to another site that similarly has the same equipment." Now, one of the things they're using to do this, people go, "Yeah, what are you using?" I'm using bullets and I'm using lasers. They're using a very advanced version of an electromagnetic pulse weapon. Now, of course, these are illegal under the International Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they use them. And they are at these test ranges for both the man-made ones to harden them, see how they will work. But when they when they have an opportunity to pick up an extraterrestrial vehicle, they can target it and knock it out of the sky. Because what an EMP, a directional energy weapon, that's EMP, does, it has also embedded in it something called a scalar or longitudinal electromagnetic field that is multiples of the speed of light. Tesla talked about it back in the, I think, 30s. And those will totally disable all electronics on any object that is in 3 dimensions, let's say, that isn't trans-dimensional. And so
welcome to Earth.
Yeah. Well, and this begs the question, why are these other non-human civilizations here? They're certainly not hostile, at all. And given what I know, what we've done to probably 1,000 or more of these objects, and thousands of these ETs have been killed. Some are still living, by the way. There are some that are still captured alive in some of these underground facilities that we would like to see liberated.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Still alive.
Aliens are from Guatemala and Venezuela. Let's not mix things up, for God's sake.
I know, that's my bad. Yeah.
That word,
the aliens.
Half the time you use that word the way it's used in our culture, you're talking about someone from wherever.
What's the proper term? Non-human?
I just call them extraterrestrial.
Extraterrestrials, still good. Now, can these energy weapons affect weather? Are they part of anything? Start fires? Can they do really anything? They're just way ahead advanced. We don't know. We can't put
those would be, I do. Those are different weapons. They have the ability to trigger fault lines and cause earthquakes. There are all kinds of
great.
Yeah, lovely things. All right. So, I don't want to. I don't want to go too far.
No, it's great.
It's good news.
No, I'm not scared. It's just sorry, little Woody Allen here.
Yeah. There you go.
Where would the safest place to be on the planet
Not on the planet.
My grandmother on my dad's side was Cherokee, and the saying, Native American saying, is there are no safe places, only safe people. So you be with good people, and that's what you should be.
Cross your fingers.
Yeah.
So being in major city centers is not more dangerous right now.
I don't want to go too far into that. It depends on your own worldview, but
I got you.
Privately, someday I'll tell you what I do.
Well, what about when they say this nuclear bomb day, and of course, then they show a photo of it was in a truck and then it was gone. It never made it. I'm like, I didn't know they're shipping these by UPS 3-day air. You think they have
one on Amazon
security around them where they go, hey, has anyone seen the bomb we had? Never got to the port. So, and then anyone hears that, and then they run with that for 3 or 4 days, and it just goes in a spiral. And Congress seems like some nice people there genuinely aren't being told, obviously, and some people do know, and they're not saying it. So I guess it all just points to don't cause a panic, because, but how do you not do that? Is there just, I had heard maybe from you or someone in the past that these extraterrestrials, there's they want to be known at some point, and no one could ever be ready for it. It's just, is there ever a point when people could get their head around it?
I think that, this gets into the question of how is it disclosed? If it's disclosed truthfully, it would be told that these are, these civilizations would be the equivalent of Gandhi or Martin Luther King. I mean, they're obviously concerned about our violence and our weaponization of space and our use of atomic and then nuclear weapons. That's why you have had so many reports around nuclear sites, both civilian power.
They don't want that, right?
No, because one of the things that happens when you detonate one of these atomic or nuclear weapons, it puts out an electromagnetic pulse, but it also puts out, embedded within it, a scalar signal that tears the fabric of space-time. Is a complicated physics. And I'm working with a man with 6 PhDs who works for one of the big corporations, and his specialty are these scalar systems. And so I think when we detonated those first atomic weapons in 1945, it's well documented that there were extraterrestrial vehicles and sightings around that time. There was a crash of one in 1945 at White Sands. Everybody has heard of Roswell, but there have been many of them. Yeah, but those don't just come. You don't go through interstellar space and can't fly through a thunderstorm. I mean, every jet pilot I know can do that. These were, even back then, we had a type of electromagnetic weapon that, with low yield, with low success, if you can call this success, were effective. Now the systems are quite advanced, and the big worry here is that at what point, if we don't fix our own problem as humans, at what point will it need to be corrected for us, which would actually be the worst case scenario. I don't think at all that they're hostile. If they were, we'd be, as one congressman said to me, we'd be our charcoal briquette floating through space would be done, right? Because when all this started, remember, we had vacuum tubes. We didn't even have transistor. We didn't have integrated circuits. Or any of that. So obviously these civilizations are trying to be very patient, but I think we're getting close to end game here. And here's why. One of the reasons why these guys are defecting, it's not just this one guy, it's people from 6 black sites. And is that the technologies that have been reverse engineered and put into deployment as weapon systems are so advanced that organization has become a threat to extraterrestrial peoples. So, in other words, we've downed their objects, studied them, and over these 7 decades come up with technologies. But instead of saving the biosphere with so-called zero-point free energy or what have you, they've been kept very secret, and they've been used by this Frankenstein that's gotten up off the table and walked away. And I don't know that that can happen much longer. So the people in that system who are now, they may have started out as the Delta Force Green Beret in their teens or 20s, and now they're middle-aged and at a senior level. They know how dangerous this is, and that's why they're taking these risks to come forward. And it's why I did. I'm 69 now. I should be retired and just seeing my 12 grandkids instead of this madness. But, when you realize what's at stake, you just say, I got to do something, and they're trying to do what they can do. So they've reached out to me to sort of speak to this in the preparation, but also to get this information to various leaders around the world.
Could I ask you a question about the rogue military organization? One thing I'm just trying to connect the dots here.
Sure.
Is that because they came in contact with alien technology, they had this power, and so they used this power to create this rogue thing. But in the big picture, what is their goal for themselves? Because they're human, right? Do they want world domination, billions of dollars? What is their?
It's like a movie.
They're just sociopaths that want to.
Yeah, no, they are. They're sociopaths. Some are psychopaths, and they have the ability to hoax all kinds of stuff. There was and this has been threatened against me, by the way. There was a whistleblower last year who wanted to come forward from an operation that had been out in the northern Nevada desert. They're called the Nevada Test Range, where we used to detonate atomic nuclear weapons and test them. who was on a team retrieving both disabled man-made UFOs. They were triangular ones. Mostly those were built by Northrop Grumman or Raytheon. But then he escalated to being part of a retrieval team when they stunned and it just landed. It didn't crash, an extraterrestrial vehicle.
Mhm.
And when he tried to defect, he was harassed. They actually set up a fake abduction event. We have the whole account. He was going to come to Congress and privately brief Senate Intelligence and Armed Services people and go to the Pentagon to give his testimony. We were in the process of booking his ticket. And there were guys that showed up at his door and they said, look at your phone and look at your computer. And they had embedded child pornography all over it. And they said, you will go to prison.
That's the easy one, right?
All right. And that kind of that dirty tricks these guys can do, the deep fakes, the AI associated stuff, the ability to penetrate. And so often what happens, these whistleblowers, they get right to the edge and then these thugs pull a trick like that. Now, I've had those games played on me for almost 30 years. I mean, I've had death threats, I've had attempts, I've had defamation, all manner of horrible things. And I was told yesterday it's going to get much worse for me in the next little bit. And I said, well, you just bake this into the cake, and people who are stupid enough and gullible enough to believe that stuff, go believe it. But I think this is very much stops dead in the tracks most people, because between those threats, and I don't talk about this that often, but back in 1992, as a young doctor, when I first started getting involved with this, the head of Army intelligence, General Stubblebine, offered me personally $2 billion if I would join his team and not pursue what I'm doing. That was a lot of money back then.
Where would he get that money? It's $2 billion. How does he? He would just move government money around.
Talking about there is so much money flowing, we don't even know where it is.
Government money.
Well, what he told there are all kinds of creative sources.
Yeah,
this was going to come out of seized assets out of Eastern Europe after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
5,000 G-Wagons.
But I mean, this was 92, right? So we're talking 32 years ago. Jeez. And they had seized.
Was there a number where you would have said yes? I mean,
what was your number?
What if you said
no, mine was a little lower than that.
No, I mean, because that would be 10 billion today, wouldn't it? If I invested it well,
you'd be on easy street.
More than I'd be better off than Elon. That's it. But anyway, I don't care about that. I've never cared about that. But but this is what my point here is: people who have this sort of information, you're offered enormous amounts of money and threats. So it's blackmail and bribery all together. Right. And the problem is most people are going to succumb. At a certain point, you're going to cry uncle when the pain gets so great. I've had 3 people on my team killed over the years.
In suspicious ways.
No,
obviously.
Absolutely killed by these people who did not want this out.
So you must have some anger too, then.
Yeah. I mean,
you're human.
Of course, but everyone knows what we're signing on to. And I'll say that these guys who they really are patriotic. They're in a bad situation. I know, visualize, just everyone listening to this for a minute. Imagine being a young man and you're, very well-trained special forces, Delta, Green Beret, Navy SEAL. And you get pulled into operations. They're all top secret, special compartmented information, need to know, very compartmented. And you just do, yes, sir, you do your thing, yes, sir. Next thing you know, you get high enough in there, you realize, wow, this is illegal and criminal. And then you get introduced to criminal activities such as arms running, drug running, human trafficking, monstrous embezzlement schemes, and things like this. And so at that point, you've been part of something. How do you come forward? Now, one thing we have arranged is that there is a law enforcement operation that I'm dealing with that's connected to this strike team that needs to be stood up under an executive order. It needs to happen yesterday. But I don't know that the Biden administration wants to touch this yet, and unless they're forced to. And then, of course, on January 20th, if all goes as planned, then there'll be a new executive or president. So at that point, this has to happen. But they have already, through this law enforcement entity, extended immunity to anyone coming forward. So in other words, and I want to say this very clearly, that anyone who wants to come forward should contact me, drstephen.greer.com. If you are a legitimate whistleblower and you have been involved in some things that you found out were not legal, you can get immunity for that and come forward. And we're also asking for very serious protection. Now, the level of protection we can provide now is 24-hour surveillance if there's any threat that comes your way. So that has been put in place. So this is how we have a heads up. And I won't say how that's being done because that's sensitive. Okay. And it's TSSCI stuff. But and I have certainly that around me. But
the drones will continue tonight.
Well, they're probably going to continue until at some point. The worst case scenario, my friend, is they escalate this. In other words, we're sort of batting this aside and saying, here's what it is. You know, it's like the movie. If you ever saw The Wizard of Oz, it's a great metaphor. So there's this old crudmudgeon that's behind the curtain. They finally pull the curtain back. And here's this old crudmudgeon scaring the bejeebies out of Dorothy and all the, whoever the scarecrow. And he's just this old decrepit fool. But that's what this is. But it's still scary. I mean, they have enough technology to project that kind of fear.
It just disrupts your lifestyle. You're like, what's going on? It's so abnormal.
Yeah. And you know what they call it? They call it stagecraft, this kind of deception and operation. But the question is then, do they get really more serious and start?
What does it get them just
buttons?
To do this? Just to scare people for what end?
Well, they want people to think that we're under some kind of alien attack because it being unknown. My job is to say, no, those aren't aliens or extraterrestrial. That's our stuff. And even the advanced stuff you're seeing are actually not, they sure look like they could be not of this world. Or keep in mind, what is 75 years and trillions of dollars in black budget funding get you technologically when you have the real McCoy? You actually have the interstellar and extraterrestrial vehicles.
When they disappear just in midair, that's just going faster than we can comprehend.
Well, there's two things. No, actually, it can be going so fast like a speeding bullet you don't see it. Right. But it can also be where, let's say you have a big object and you can create an electromagnetic field effect around it where it takes all the matter of that object out of, let's say, sync with 3D. And it goes into another, it's transdimensional. So it actually goes from one dimension to another and back. So that's, there's a whole spectrum. I understand these technologies very well, by the way. And it's a whole spectrum of phenomenon. And one of the big problems arises from people in the National Military Command system not read into the human ones that look extraterrestrial. They can be tricked. I know of a 4-star admiral who was the commander-in-chief, Atlantic Command, SYNC Atlantic Command back in the early 80s. And there was one of these objects that came off the coast of Newfoundland. And we have this from our Disclosure Project witness. His name was Merle Shane McDowell. He's in our archive. You can read his transcript and see his interview. I have been at that command center, basically where World War III would be fought. And, they run all the nuclear submarines from there. And when this event happened, the admiral panicked. They went to a full code zebra alert, which means if you don't have a zebra badge on your lapel, the Marines with M16s kill everyone in there who shouldn't be in there. And they didn't know what this thing was. And so he got on the hotline to Moscow. It wasn't ours. They said it wasn't theirs. But if certain things had escalated, if actions on our part had escalated or been miscalculated, we could have been in World War III. This was in 1980 or 81 or something. So the danger of this is not knowing. Knowledge is power. But ignorance on something this important is very dangerous for our nation and the world. So my whole point right now is to let people know your ignorance of this subject is no longer a luxury we can afford if you're in that system. If you're in the legal constitutional government of the United States, Democrat, Republican, socialist, I don't care. You've got to understand these things. You've got to understand the technologies. Now, I have put together a 312 executive briefing document that's being given to key people in the current and the incoming administration and Senate Intelligence and Armed Services and some other people.
So you could be face to face with President Trump in a month or so in the Oval, debriefing him.
Saying this.
I'm not going to comment on what
Well,
we're
could.
already
It's
doing.
possible.
I won't be doing that, but
Yeah.
it's possible you know.
I go wherever I'm asked to go if it's someone sincere who I think needs to know the details.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have one more question, and then we'll let you go. But appreciate you being here. Where's Elon in all this? He seems like he knows the most about space. And
That's a good question. I have not spoken with him. I know people who work with him closely. To the extent he's been read in or informed about this is unknown to me. I think the other person, there are some other people I have been meeting with, I'd rather not name, that are incoming cabinet level and very high key people for national security that have a need to know, and that I've been providing this information to in the last few weeks since the election. And they're very responsive. They're concerned. And I know that, for example, RFK Jr. Knows that his uncle, Jack Kennedy, was killed by the CIA for something related to this. And he suspects his father was also. So, and in fact, I have a source in London that actually has all the information on that he's going to hand over to me fairly soon. He's a very senior person in the British establishment.
A lot of shoes to drop in the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this stuff should have never been kept secret. When I met with, I don't know if you all remember, now I'm dating myself. I mean, I was a child then, but
we're in the same. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you ever see Felix the Cat? That was the cartoon.
There you go. So I don't know if you guys remember in 1964, this Senator Barry Goldwater.
Very much so.
Yeah. And Arizona.
Something is not a vice. Freedom is, whatever.
Yeah,
that was his.
And he was running against Johnson, right after Kennedy was killed, President Johnson. And when I met with him back in the 90s at his home there in Scottsdale, he said it was a goddamn mistake then and a goddamn mistake now that this was ever kept secret. He was cursing up a blue streak. He's a character. Oh. And he told me a very interesting story. And these stories are important because you can extrapolate it across the system. So imagine you're in the running, a 50-50 chance or so to be the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. You're on all these key Senate committees. You're the senior senator from Arizona. Mm-hmm. He had a very good friend named General Curtis LeMay, who at one time had been head of the Air Force.
Yep.
And they called him Bomber back to the Stone Age LeMay because he wanted to drop nuclear weapons into China and Vietnam. Yep.
Yeah. He was a bomb guy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, oh yeah. But he also knew about this issue. Some limited.
Yeah.
So at one point, Senator Goldwater asked General LeMay, I want to get into the, quote, blue room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which back then there was a lot of extraterrestrial material that was sent there. And all the way back to the 40s, by the way, Wright-Patterson, very key. And he said, General LeMay turned to him and said, God damn it, Barry, I can't even get into that area anymore. And if you ever ask me about this again, I will personally see that you are court-martialed out of the Air Force Reserve. Because Barry was a general in the Air Force Reserve. So I'm sitting in Barry Goldwater's house, and he's dropping this shit on. And I go, wow. Was he serious? I said, was Curtis LeMay serious? He says, oh, yeah, he was serious as a heart attack.
Huh.
And so subsequently, he did reach out to a member of this cabal. He asked me who's involved. I started naming names. I came across one was a senior admiral who had become deputy director CIA and head of the National Security Agency, and Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. And he I just gave you a name. He's still living. And he yeah. Don't worry, CIA is listening too.
Sorry,
great.
And you know what he said? So this was back then. So he after I had this meeting, so I said, well, why don't you reach out to him? He said, oh, I've known Bobby Ray for years. So I said, oh, great, because Bobby Ray Inman moved from director of National Security Agency over to the board of Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, that's done a lot of this covert contracting related to UFOs. So he reached out to him. he later got back to me, and his daughter got back to me and said, Dr. Greer, he can't make any more phone calls like that for you. He can't. It's too dangerous. And I don't know what Admiral Inman said to Senator Goldwater, but it put the fear of God in him, and he never brought it up again. But I have a lovely letter from Senator Goldwater about it. It's in our archive if you want to look at it. But, he was just like he was an interesting character. He was more like what you would call a libertarian today, I guess. Because he certainly was not a far right religious person by any stretch.
He was the guy who told Nixon, "You got to go." He was the guy who walked down the White House. Said, "When you lose Barry Goldwater, time to go.
You're done. We're done."
He was definitely a tough character.
I'm from Arizona. I knew all about. I grew up with Barry Goldwater.
Yeah. Well, you probably know where his house was in Paradise Valley. In that area.
I can't disclose that, but yeah.
We can't. We have.
I want something to not disclose.
Just take that story. Imagine being at that rank. And you're a reserve Air Force general, you're Senator Goldwater, and you are absolutely blocked from knowing this. So, and that is in the frickin' 60s, right? So this whole train has been out of control, off the tracks since I was born in 1955. Not quite, but yeah.
Well,
wow,
it's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
It's a lot. We're
not done with you. We are for now.
This podcast twice because there's a lot of information in it.
Yeah,
I know. I apologize.
But no, not at all. I mean, it's all very, very interesting. Just take care of yourself, and thanks for coming on to our show. Really, really.
All right, love you guys.
We will talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you.
This has been a presentation of Odyssey. Superfly is executive produced by Dana Carvey and David Spade, Jenna Weiss-Berman of Odyssey, Heather Santoro, and Greg Holtzman. Hope you liked it. Ooh.